control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we're talking about an episode of the Twilight Zone called The Purple Testament. This is from season 1, that's episode 19. Directed by Richard Baer, written by Rod Serling. This is his own piece of work, and starring William Reynolds as Lieutenant Fitzgerald, Dick York as Captain Riker. And there's various other people. The most notable one is not a particularly big part, but Warren Oates does appear here towards the end as a Jeep driver, so it's kind of interesting to see Warren Oates in his early days in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Now, this is, in quotes, the story about the man who can see death coming, really. It first aired on February the 12th, 1960 on CBS, and the opening narration is by Rod Serling, and it's very purple prose, which is appropriate given this is called Purple Testament. And he talks about the faces of the men in the war, in the US Army in the Philippines in the 1945, still in the Second World War, and he refers to them in terms of colours. He suggests some omniscient painter is mixing the oils for each of the young men. He says earth brown, dust grey, blood red, beard black, and fear yellow white, with these men as the models. So there's a setup that colour is some sort of element of this, which comes to at the closing narration. I'll get to that. So these are men in war, and we find that they're on a Pacific island, and there's a young lieutenant called William Fitzgerald, who suddenly, somehow, for no obvious reason, mentions that 4 men who died in an operation they just did, he had their names written on a piece of paper. And it turns out that he said, I saw a weird light on their face last night of all 4 of them. And it turns out this light is his way of predicting death. And he tells his colleague, who is Captain Riker. Now, Captain Riker is played by Dick York. Dick York, most famously, is probably the first Darren from Bewitched. He's quite a good comic actor and not a bad serious actor. He's also pretty good in a film called Inherit the Wind, where he plays a teacher that gets into trouble for teaching the principles of evolution to his class. A very famous trial called the Scopes Monkey Trial from 1925. And it's interesting that America has still got these controversies about evolution after all this, nearly 100 years ago, and that happens. Anyway, Dick York also appears in this. And he's his friend who first hears about this power that Fitz has got, and he sort of tries to talk about it. He says, you can't do that. That's nonsense. But the word gets around the squadron, and everyone starts to say, can you see me? Tell me, please tell me. And he's saying, Dick York's character is saying, this can't possibly be true. You cannot believe this. But then they're going on an operation, and Fitz sees the light in his friend's face and tells him, he goes, listen, this is not true. We're going to have a drink and laugh about this afterwards. Trust me. It's a simple operation. Nothing really should go wrong. Unfortunately, yes, it turns out that man does die as part of the operation. He also visits a hospital and they talk about a man pulling through and he sees a light in that man's face too. So basically he hates it. He talks to the doctor. He says, is there some way you can stop it? Can you take my eyes out so I don't see it? I don't want this power. It develops like this. But people believe him. But then he decides he's going to get recalled back for a long furlough to have tests. And he's kind of not relieved because he sees himself in a mirror and his own face has got the light on it. And when a Jeep driver comes up and sort of gets him, he also sees a light on the Jeep driver's face. The Jeep driver says something like, but might as well relax, we've got a 4-hour drive. I'll try not to make it too bumpy. And he's kind of, I don't think it's going to be that long. And then they drive off. And meanwhile, one point is he's not sure about having to go. When Dick York is sort of trying to talk to the men and sort of say no one can do this, Fitz hides what he knows because he knows it might cause a mutiny and a sort of general uproar. So there's kind of an interesting character stuff going on there. Meanwhile, Riker, who gets shot by a sniper, is dead, and he gets in the Jeep drives off, and the men left behind are sort of playing the harmonica, sort of listening, and they hear a boom, and they sort of say, nah, I think that's fun. I don't quite understand this in this. It must be fun, but it's clearly the Jeep has been blown up by a mine. There is some talk that, stay away from the sides of the roads because of the mines, or maybe it's the centre of the road. I can't remember now. And so that happens, and it finishes. So this poor man who has this power sees himself in the same light. And the actual name of the story comes from a quote from Richard II. Now, Rod Serling attributes it to Richard III, but in fact it's a Richard II quote, which is, he has come to the Purple Testament of bleeding war. So that equates colour to this. So the Purple Testament is after that quote. Interesting things about this episode. Dean Stockwell was originally cast to play Fitz, but unfortunately couldn't commit, so we've seen a very young Dean Stockwell. But apparently he does appear later on in a very similar kind of story called Equality of Mercy. But we'll see. We'll see. And apparently this idea about the light in the face was in an episode called Into the Light and the 2001 revival of the Twilight Zone. I think the second revival of the Twilight Zone, in fact. And there's lots of episodes with this kind of idea of premonition and sort of being able to anticipate death. So, yeah, okay. In addition, another sort of interesting thing about this episode is the director, Richard Bett, and the man playing Fitz, William Reynolds, was out filming in the Caribbean for a TV series, a pilot, I think, called The Islanders, and they were in a plane crash. Plane engines both failed. They crashed, broke their legs, but managed to swim somewhere to get safe. And that was the night this episode was first broadcast. And I think Reynolds claims that Rod Serling asked for the episode to be pulled, and I'm sure that was a consideration. And some reports say yes, it was pulled without any fanfare or explanation. They didn't want the families distressed, which does sound like Rod Serling. But other sources claim that no, it wasn't pulled; it was still shown. I suspect what happened, it was pulled in some places, but not pulled in every location. I suspect it was some sort of mix. And in fact, they both survived, both Richard Bett and William Reynolds. While they were quite damaged state, they both survived. And apparently, while they were swimming through the ocean to sort of get to land to sort of, save themselves, they even made a joke about it as they were swimming. Oh man, the Purple Testament it has tonight. Please don't look at me. It was those kind of jokes as they were swimming along, which is pretty cool. So it was an okay episode per se, I think, but not particularly outstanding. It was reasonably well done. It filled its time well, but there's nothing that really elevated to this is a great episode. It was decent. It was a decent episode at best. So that's it for this time. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We're not.
We now return control of your television set to you. Until next week at this same time. when the control voice will take you to